So thank you everyone for being here. It's lovely to see you again and slowly get to know you, which is really nice from my side. And then people who will join online later, so a warm welcome to them as well. And I thought it'd be nice to launch straight into it. Excuse me. So what we might do is we can jump straight into getting ready for taking refuge and generating bodhicitta, those who are Buddhist inclined. And we'll do that with first doing, as we usually do, a meditation to ready our mind. And we could be ready to do a meditation preparation on the three principal aspects of the path, which are a really good way of generating then refuge bodhicitta. So I'm talking about renunciation, I'm talking about bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness, the correct view. So we'll look at just doing these three. Obviously, it's a teaching weekend, so we won't be so elaborate, and we'll do that more on the retreat weekend, some elaborate meditations, particularly on those three. So if we can find a comfortable position, at least with the back straight, and you would have learned your techniques from module 2. And so we can bring to mind Guru Shakyamuni Buddha in front of us on a lion throne and so forth. Bring to mind as much of the imagery as you can remember. Most importantly, feeling in the presence, in actuality, even though we can't see it or feel it right now as exactly as it is, nevertheless, Guru Shakyamuni Buddha does appear in front of us right now. And when we purify our karma, we'll be able to see exactly that. So feeling in the presence of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha is, with all this all-encompassing love and compassion for you and all sentient beings, which we can imagine seated around us. The Buddha smiling at us, so happy that we're choosing to engage in finding solutions to all our problems forever. And so Shakyamuni Buddha says to us, son or daughter of the lineage, if you want to be liberated from the suffering of samsara, I will guide you. So feel that protection is there, coming from the Buddha, the teachings that the Buddha gave, the Dharma, and all who have realized it already, the Sangha, which can be lay or monk or nun, having that realization of emptiness non-conceptually, then they become Arya Sangha. And so first we can generate a mind of renunciation to our own suffering by thinking, for instance, how we have been experiencing oceans of samsaric suffering since beginningless time. Again and again, we've been in all 6 realms of existence. Experiencing those particular sufferings associated with each of the realms, like the animal realm and the human realm we can relate to as well now. That in any given moment, things can dramatically change. Death of ourselves, death of our loved ones, sickness, debilitating sickness, diseases, loss of job, income, security. Constantly oscillating through attachment and aversion, not getting what we want, getting what we don't want, being separated from the things we wish for. Having this body and mind programmed by karma and delusions, under the control of karma and delusions. We meet with suffering. So wherever I go is a place of suffering. Whatever I enjoy is also in the nature of suffering, the suffering of change. While we remain in samsara, we will never be able to escape suffering. It will just be endless. So beginningless and endless. But if we can realize the Four Noble Truths, we can entirely overcome suffering and its causes. And this will be forever. We'll never fall back from such a state of peace and genuine happiness. Our samsara will have an end. And so as much as possible, with a single pointed mind, concentrate wholeheartedly on the aspiration to generate the mind of renunciation and realize the Four Noble Truths. And just as we wish for ourselves to be free of suffering and its causes, to be free of samsara, achieving liberation, we don't operate in this world independently. We completely rely on others. And so we can shift that focus of self-compassion, wanting ourselves to be free of suffering. We can shift from self-compassion to other compassion, turning the spotlight onto the limitless sentient beings that we have encountered in this life, indirectly helping us in all ways of being able to have food and clean water and hospitals and schools and roads, all the services, amenities we enjoy, the clothes we wear has all come through others. And it's been like this in beginningless lives. They've all been our loved ones, near and dear. and helped us in so many ways, although we cannot put a face to them as our helpers. And so we can reflect how, just like me, all these limitless sentient beings have been endlessly or beginninglessly and will endlessly experience samsara unless they too can realize the path. Their state is utterly pitiful. And often experiencing far greater sufferings than we ourselves are experiencing. We know this just from turning on the news, seeing it with our own eyes as we walk down the streets. And that's just in the human realm and the animal realm. Whereas we have all the conditions right now, the inner conditions, this body and mind in human form with great intelligence and all the composition of the elements of the body, which we can put to great use in later stages of Buddhism. And so we have the perfect inner conditions, we have the perfect outer conditions, having met with the teachings, the Buddhist teachings and the Mahayana teachings and precious holy beings like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lamas of Rinpoche and so forth. With this precious human life, we have everything right here, right now. And so in the most meaningful way, finding our purpose, we can use our body and mind to benefit others and free them from all their suffering by developing this great compassion that wishes they be separated from suffering and its causes. And then on top of that, an even stronger great compassion that takes responsibility, that I myself alone will make it happen. I will free them from suffering and bring them to enlightenment. And to do that, we need to rely on Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, those beings who have already realized the Four Noble Truths, attained true paths and or true cessations. And they happily offer us protection to guide us so that we ourselves can develop Buddha, Dharma, Sangha in our own continuum. And so with this reliance, with this mind of renunciation, mind of great compassion, all of this is possible because of the correct view, because everything, ourselves, our body, our mind, all phenomena, our refuge, it all lacks inherent existence. It lacks independent existence, which means it is dependent, it's related. And so therefore we can change, we can develop, we can grow, we can transform our mind, we can become Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So all this is possible because of the correct view. And so we can, with this in mind, these three principal aspects, the I, who's merely labeled, can go for refuge, which is merely labeled. Independence on Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, who are merely labeled, to benefit all living beings who are merely labeled. And so if you like, you can join me in refuge and we can recite it 3 times as we usually do. Keeping alive the mind of renunciation in particular this session, but bodhicitta and emptiness, the 3 principal aspects. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. And so we've done quite a bit already. So hopefully some knowledge, understanding, and so forth is developing. We've looked at all of these things already, so I'll try not to review them this time round. And we are up to the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment, the Lam Rim. We've looked at the small scope. We're finishing the middle scope today. Next 2 weeks will be the great scope. And of the 4 noble truths, we've looked at true suffering and true origins last week, and true cessations and true paths today. And within those true paths, I will bring in some of the 3 principal aspects of the path, mainly renunciation. And if we get some time, maybe more on correct view. Otherwise, the subsequent 2 weeks will be on bodhicitta, and then the wisdom, realizing emptiness, the correct view. And as we go through each of those 3 principal aspects in relation to true paths and so forth, we can also see how individually we can apply to daily life the mind of renunciation today, and then bodhicitta and correct view in the subsequent weeks. And I believe you have, if not, I can do it again today in the chat, the foundation of all good qualities, which I was thinking about using that on our retreat day, but also I'm not sure whether to do that or use the 3 principal aspects of the path. Both are fantastic and really would be awesome to recite both daily. So I would encourage that if you're not already doing it, please start that from today. It will only benefit you by laying out the entire path to Buddhahood in a single prayer in like 14 verses, for instance. So yes, please do recite those 2 prayers daily, and I'll put them both in the chat at the end of the session. I know you haven't got the 3 principal aspects, so I can do both again if need be, or just that one. So yeah, that's really so critical. So, okay, so let's go to the 4 noble truths. And we looked at true suffering last week, and we looked at how there were various types of suffering. But basically, that's things that you could research by going into more detail, reading the Lam Rim texts and so forth, because, you know, you will visit it in Discovering Buddhism, Samsara module, Samsara Nirvana. And it's, you know, it's something that the details are very important to understand, but obviously beyond the scope of presenting the path, which is just giving little bits of here and there of what these things cover without going into great detail. So it's more just skimming across things due to the nature of what we're covering in the entire path. So yeah, basically without suffering, there is no generation of renunciation. And I think last week I looked at even some of the benefits of suffering that Shantideva has brought out. Yeah. Anyway, so true suffering, why do we suffer? It's not because it's just some random thing. It's something that is caused. Suffering is a result, therefore necessarily has a cause. And what are those causes of our suffering? We jump to true origins. It was karma and afflictions. So of the 2, karma and afflictions, the main one is the afflictions, and the main affliction would be that ignorance grasping at a self to inherently exist. So chief of true origins of the 2 karma and afflictions would be afflictions, and chief of the afflictions, grasping at inherent existence. So then what we're up to today is this true cessation. So Yeah, please refresh your mind if you haven't already with, what we've covered in the previous weeks by going back to the YouTubes if you need to, refresh your mind about the suffering of change and, the different aspects of karma and delusions and the different types of the three main root afflictions: ignorance, attachment, and aversion or anger, and all of those sorts of things, so that you can put it all in context. So true cessations, this is what we're looking at today, and this is exciting because this is the true cessations. What basically we're talking about, the main true cessation here, what we're talking about is at least liberation. So I think that we call that an ultimate true cessation, and then enlightenment would be supreme true cessation. But you can also have true cessations occurring from the path of seeing through the path of meditation, where after you've gone into meditative equipoise with the powerful antidote, wisdom realizing emptiness, conjoined hopefully with bodhicitta of the great scope, or at least renunciation of the middling scope, then you have the power through that method and wisdom combined, that power of the wisdom realizing emptiness to be able to overcome a portion of afflictive obscurations, which is, your afflictions and seeds of afflictions and so forth. So you have the powerful antidote to overcome karma and afflictions. And so at the end of that, or because of the strength of that powerful antidote, it destroys afflictions and their seeds on our mind stream in a graduated process. And so there's a true cessation, after having abandoned a portion of afflictions, karma and afflictions at a certain point. So the seeing abandonments on the path of seeing, when you've abandoned the seeing abandonments, you have a true cessation, and then you go back into meditative equipoise after accumulating a lot more merit, and you continue to abandon more afflictions from their gross right down to their subtle eventually. So there's different types of true cessation. We're looking here mainly at the liberation or nirvana. So we're looking at this ultimate cessation. And what else? Let's have a look at how that's even possible. So true cessations, we know we can achieve them because when in module 1, you looked at mind in its potential. And so true cessation is possible because nirvana, liberation, is possible because the fundamental nature of consciousness is luminous and pure. We've looked at or clear and knowing and these sorts of things. It's whether it be on a conventional level or an ultimate level, the nature of the mind is fundamentally pure in its nature. And we saw analogies like the sky as opposed to the clouds which are passing through it, or water, which is pure by nature, and then there's all the sediment and dirt and filth in there. And those were likened to the afflictions, but they could be purified, removed, and even drink the water because they have not become ingrained into the very nature of the mind. So the nature of the mind remains pure despite the afflictions that cover it, or cover it is fine for now. So the afflictions, because they have not entered into the very nature of the mind, becoming one with the nature of the mind, it's not like that. So they can be separated or removed, leaving the pure nature untainted by these obscurations and so forth. So they can be separated. Kedrup J talks about how the stains are adventitious, which means that they're temporary and they could be removed by a powerful antidote. And so that gets at this next point here. There are powerful antidotes, namely the wisdom realizing emptiness of inherent existence, that can be applied. And these powerful antidotes will be the true paths being kind of like the cause. We say the Four Noble Truths are two sets of cause and effect, but in actuality, it's not entirely true, because whilst true origins do bring about true suffering, true paths bring about true cessations, but they're not exactly a cause, because true cessations is not a result. If it was a result, it would be impermanent phenomena. But these true cessations are permanent, which means that although they have parts and merely labeled by mind, they're not dependent on causes and conditions. So they're not a result in the sense of being caused. That's only applicable to impermanent phenomena. But we do nevertheless loosely talk about it as two sets of cause and effect. And true paths bring about, we say, rather than cause, or you can say cause, but you mean it very loosely. So true paths bring about true cessations. They induce true cessations. When you realize emptiness, you have that powerful antidote to abandon the afflictions, and the absence of those afflictions in your mind is like the cessation or the ceasing or the ending of those afflictions is like a true cessation, that when it's fully overcome all afflictions, all karma, all true origins, and therefore true suffering produced by those true origins, when you've overcome all of that, you've attained the true cessation of liberation, that ultimate true cessation. So yeah, like that. So true paths induce true cessation. So true cessations are entirely possible because of the nature of the mind being pure. And we can develop these powerful antidotes and so forth. So, one thing we can do, and tonight when you guys are getting ready for sleep, is just to try to imagine, write down. I'm giving you homework throughout the session. So one of your homework pieces can be to imagine, just how it would be to be totally forever free of afflictions, so that you never have anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, and ignorance, and all of these things ever arise again. Like, how would that be? And put your mind in that state as you begin to get ready for sleep. So I imagine it would be, something incredibly blissful and incredibly beneficial, that we never lashed out at anyone or anything ever again. And, there'll be nothing more sublime than being able to generate this true cessation in our mind. And this true cessation, this is the way we definitely can emerge from samsara and achieve liberation. So we'll never fall back from liberation. It's not that you suddenly abandon all the afflictive obscurations, then they arise again. The seeds have been destroyed, so they can never arise again. They can never produce again another affliction in our mind. And so, yeah, that would be like utterly supreme. So you can think about that. So that's probably all I will do on true cessations for the time being. Oh, thank you, Isabella. You've got it in the chat, maybe. You're so gorgeous. Thank you so much. That's wonderful for putting it in the chat for us. I appreciate your help. And so then let's have a look at true paths. So this is where I want to focus a little bit more today. Now, the chief, I've said, is the wisdom realizing emptiness. Emptiness of what? Emptiness of inherent existence. So this is the main true path. True paths are generally consciousnesses, not always. They are also the vowels in our continuum. The true paths is when we get to a certain level. Now, we've been talking about having the power to be able to abandon karma and afflictions, to undo true origins, which bring about true sufferings, undo that with true paths to bring about true cessations. So these true paths are only in the continuum of somebody who's an Arya being, a noble being, a superior being. Okay? So that's a very big distinction. So we're talking, I'll elaborate more on that as we go, but that's just something to know from the get-go. We're talking about true paths being in the continuum of an Arya being, as opposed to an ordinary being. So a superior being versus an ordinary being. These are different. Superior, Arya, noble, different names, different translations versus an ordinary being. If you look at the 5 paths, from the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of normal learning, we're talking about ordinary beings being the path of accumulation or the path of preparation. They haven't yet non-conceptually or perceptually realized emptiness. And so they don't yet have that powerful antidote to be able to abandon forever karma and afflictions. So they're ordinary beings at that stage. From the path of seeing onwards, they become Arya beings, noble beings, superior beings. And it's because they have that perceptual realization of emptiness. So that's something worth knowing, that we're talking any of these Four Noble Truths, the Four Truths realized by noble being. So they've realized the nature of them. And yeah, so a true path is different to a path. So a path is a consciousness, and we usually talk about a path as being a clear realization or a pristine awareness, or usually a clear realization qualified by uncontrived wish to definitely emerge, something like that, uncontrived renunciation. So a pristine awareness or clear realization qualified by uncontrived renunciation, that's a path. Now that would be, of your 5 paths, to even enter the first path. If you're on a hero or solitary realizer vehicle, with uncontrived renunciation, you enter the path, an ordinary being on those 2 paths. If you're a Mahayanist following the Bodhisattva vehicle, you definitely need renunciation. And then on top of that, bodhicitta to enter the Mahayana path of accumulation. But you're still an ordinary being until the path of seeing. So a path is different to a true path. Yeah. That's just something to be aware of with terminology, so that you can always remember that a true path is from the path of seeing. So the main true paths we're going to be looking at would be the 3 principal aspects of the path. In the middle scope, they would be the 3 higher trainings: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And so these true paths, I remember, they're going to be minds generally, mostly, consciousnesses that bring about that transformation to overcome karma and afflictions. So remember, we said that with the ethics, it weakens our afflictions. With our concentration, it suppresses the manifest afflictions, but it's only on the basis of ethics, concentration, this wisdom, that we can actually totally eradicate or eliminate ignorance and all that flows on from that, all other afflictions and karma and so forth that would induce the suffering of samsara. So this path is a way that leads us out of samsara to liberation or enlightenment. Okay, so true paths is what we're looking at. That's probably the main essence of what I want to establish there. So let's have a look at some of these true paths. And firstly, the first one being renunciation. We can get a lot of misconceptions when we talk about renunciation. This, mind to definitely emerge from samsara, and you're emerging from something to something. You're emerging from samsara to liberation. So it's always got these 2 aspects. We can get a lot of misconceptions in our everyday language, though, when we think of renunciation. So we can think it means, oh, I've got to give up everything. I've got to give up happiness. I've got to give up all my things. And I've got to live this life of a renunciate where I basically have nothing. This is not what we're talking about. So this is a misconception. And so renunciation is not, it's a state of mind. It's a consciousness. So it's got nothing to do with the physical objects as such. So it's not that you have to give up the physical objects. We talked last week about the suffering of change, right? Contaminated happiness. And we said that we do need happiness, but what we had to give up, even though it's only temporary happiness while we're in samsara, and the more we're attached to those things and objects and people, the more we will never look at a higher happiness. So what we have to give up isn't so much the objects, but the attachment and clinging, grasping, craving onto them. That's the problem. So the object itself is not the problem. It's the mind of clinging, craving, grasping, attachment that clings and suffocates the life out of the things we're attached to, whether it be the people or so forth in our realm of attachment. So yeah, it's not this giving up of the physical things of this life. It's not giving up pleasures and denying ourselves happiness and, oh, I've got to be miserable now. I'm going to renounce. It's nothing like that. If anything, but by giving up our attachment to pleasurable objects as if they were the cause of my happiness, they're only conditions. But if we were to think they were the cause, then, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So giving up the pleasures, denying ourselves happiness is not what renunciation is about. What we will do by developing renunciation is actually get a greater happiness, an uncontaminated happiness, a pure happiness, a lasting happiness, an ultimate happiness like that. So renunciation is not giving up pleasures. It's not denying happiness. It's actually seeking a deeper sense of happiness and inner peace, contentment. And all of that comes about when we develop a mind of renunciation that stop seeking the samsaric pleasures and happiness as if that's all there is, and seek something much more lasting and things that would blow our mind with the level of bliss and so forth. So it's not that. It's also not running away or escaping a difficult situation, or sometimes we think that it can be like this. We've got to run away and run off to the caves and all of these sorts of things, be isolated. It's not about that as well. So this is running away or escaping a difficult situation is not what we're talking about here. We're not giving up on things. We're actually just trying to focus on everything that's internal, in the sense of the cause of my happiness is internal because the result of happiness is internal. So there has to be that correlation, and we have to start to see that what we see as happiness now is never lasting. It's only contaminated. The more we have, it's not the happier we get. In fact, it changes. The suffering of change, it changes to become a sense of suffering. And then we have got to substitute, this and that, and try to always get some level of happiness. But in samsara, we'll never find happiness. It's not in, the relationships we have. If we were to, imagine the love of your life, and you might enjoy some intimacy with that partner. Well, imagine if that was really the cause of your happiness, the more you did it, the more happiness you would get. And if you did it 24/7, for how many 24/7s could you possibly do that before it would reveal itself as being in the nature of suffering and enough already? So it's not becoming a yogi or a monastic. This is not what renunciation is about. As I said earlier, an Arya Sangha is someone who has true paths and true cessations in their continuum, and that does not necessitate that they are a monastic, a monk or a nun. So it's, renunciation is none of these things, but it is a determination to seek some sort of higher, more lasting happiness than samsara can offer. So look, what have I got here? I've got renunciation. It's a state of mind. So not a physical object or anything like this, an isolated place, a cave or anything like that. It's not having the slightest attraction to samsaric pleasures for even an instant. That's really hard for us, isn't it? So we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Not having the slightest attraction for samsaric pleasures for even an instant, and having a strong wish for liberation. So developing renunciation is not the same as liberation. We still have to develop true paths and all of these things like wisdom, realizing emptiness and so forth. But it's a starting point, this renunciation. So basically this renunciation, if we can develop this in our mind, then we're going to be focused on the aspiration for liberation and not hooked in, pulled back, and caught up in all of the samsaric pleasures and so forth. So we need these two elements to not have the slightest attraction and attachment to and craving for samsaric pleasures, and have a mind set, determined to achieve liberation. So that's basically renunciation. Now, although we looked at it partly in the context of the middle scope, it's not just a middle scope practice. So you also need it, as I mentioned, for the great scope, as well as bodhicitta, to enter into the Mahayana path of accumulation. But you also need this renunciation, even if you take up the highest vehicle practice of Tantra, you still need renunciation in Tantric practice. So renunciation is critical for whether it be a Hinayana path, Mahayana path, whether it be Mahayana Sutra, Mahayana Tantra, you need it throughout. So without renunciation, there will not be great compassion, which means there'll be no bodhicitta, no liberation, no enlightenment. So it's really, really, really critical. So what we might have a look at is just how we can relate it to the three scopes and then how we can apply it in our daily practice. So let's see, I think I can, let's see, maybe I stop sharing there for a moment. Can't remember what's on my slides. I haven't seen it for, I don't remember it all off the top of my head, what's on the slides. All right, so the renunciation in the three scopes. So in the small scope, remember you're aiming to achieve a fortunate rebirth in samsara. What we already have, but we know it's not enough. We want more than that. We want to be free of suffering forever. But even in the small scope, we need renunciation, but it's not pure renunciation that we're talking about in the middle scope. But we need to turn away from the pleasures of this life to think about future lives. So this one single life of 60, 70, 80 years, 90 years, if you're lucky, by comparison to endless lives and beginningless lives, this, it's really nothing. And yet we find it all so consuming. But if we can go beyond the happiness of just this one life and look at future lives' happiness, because we'll be cultivating virtue, our mind will be happy in pursuing happiness of future lives. And so by default, we will be happy in this life. So we don't have to give up, happiness of this life as such if we're pursuing a life of virtue. If we've got that life that's meaningful through virtue, then as a default, we'll be happy in this life, but we'll be focused on future lives' happiness. And so we'll be engaging in virtuous actions, not the 10 non-virtues and so forth. So that would be renunciation of the small scope, but it's not pure renunciation. It's only when we get to the middle scope that we're talking about pure renunciation. So it's turning away from even the happiness of future lives in samsara. It's even renouncing that. No longer are we happy for an upper realm rebirth as a human or a god in the middle scope, but we want to be entirely free of samsara. So we're renouncing even future lives' happiness, not just lower realms, but also future lives. We're renouncing samsara, and that's true suffering, right? And what causes it? True origins. So we're renouncing true origins that cause true suffering. We're renouncing all of samsara and its causes. Okay. And then we're two elements. So we're renouncing that and we're seeking, we've got our minds set, determined to achieve liberation or even enlightenment if we follow the great scope and have these middle scope and small scope in common. Okay. So we don't pursue as our final goal the small scope of higher realm rebirths. We need them. We need a succession of precious human rebirths to continue the journey as we are in this life. Okay. So this is probably not the first time we've done Buddhism, right? Probably in our last lives, we've met it too, and in our future lives as well. So from the small scope, we do need a succession of precious human rebirths to continue the journey like we are now from where we left off last time. But we want to go beyond just getting precious human rebirths. We want to go beyond samsara to liberation. But as we saw in our motivation, we don't want to just be stuck there ourselves alone, blissing out in meditative equipoise on emptiness and so forth, and experiencing that bliss while everyone else around us is suffering immeasurably and endlessly. Okay, so yes, we share the 3 higher trainings and renunciation in common with the middle scope, but from a great scope, we're trying to bring all sentient beings to enlightenment. And so from the great scope, what we're doing with this, we're seeing our own suffering and it's how it's caused. And then we're relating it. It's like we turn the spotlight from ourselves. We start with ourselves, but then we turn the spotlight out to others. And we see how just like me, they're also suffering and they will suffer endlessly. And so therefore I need to take responsibility because all my realizations that I'll ever develop will come about due to sentient beings. For instance, even just practicing morality, non-harmfulness. If you take a vow not to kill, okay, then you are making that promise to all sentient beings that you will not harm them through taking their life, what is most precious and dear. So even just to live in one vow depends on every single sentient being. And so they have caused you to have that ethics. But even when you go on to develop, mind of great compassion, bodhicitta, and all these other things, clearly they depend on all sentient beings as well. Even generosity of giving, an intention to give is in relation to a sentient being. So everything's coming about in dependence on sentient beings. And so with this renunciation of not wanting myself to suffer, to overcome true suffering, which is caused by true origins, I turn the spotlight onto everybody else and see they're in the exact same situation of being in samsara as me and often suffering far worse than what I am in any given moment. And so by turning that spotlight, I generate now great compassion. And so that's where I'm going to take responsibility to free all those sentient beings from samsara, suffering and its causes, and bring them to enlightenment. So you can see this renunciation is in all 3 scopes, from the small scope to then becoming a pure renunciation of the middle scope, but then not just aiming for liberation, but in the great scope, that renunciation becomes kind of like the cause from which we then go on to generate great compassion. And then after generating great compassion, particularly that wants to take responsibility to liberate all sentient beings by myself alone, stepping up, then one will go on to develop bodhicitta, realizing that the only way to benefit sentient beings is if I become a Buddha myself. And so I aspire, the 2 aspirations is what bodhicitta is. I aspire to achieve Buddhahood for the welfare of all sentient beings, to free them from all suffering and bring them to enlightenment. So you can see renunciation across all 3 scopes there, okay? And at each stage, it's intensified. It's more intense than the previous level of renunciation. So for us ourselves, what we were trying to do is give up our attachment to samsara, right? The pleasures of cyclic existence, and to be able to aspire to liberation or enlightenment. So if we need suffering, without suffering, there is no renunciation. And without renunciation, no, great compassion, bodhicitta, liberation, enlightenment. Therefore, we need this suffering, don't we? And so we all experience suffering on a day-to-day basis, moment by moment, okay? So how can we bring a sense of renunciation into our daily lives? And one of the things that we can think of, for instance, is there's a really cool saying, I like it since I heard it. There's always something not quite right. As in, like, that's samsara. What is samsara? It's not a technical definition, it's just a saying. But what's samsara? There's always something not quite right. So when things aren't quite right for us, we can remind ourselves that there's always something not quite right. And it helps us to let go a little bit and a bit more freedom and space instead of being so hooked by the suffering that we're experiencing at that time, just to create a little bit of distance. So as long as we're in samsara, we'll always meet with suffering that's going to be obvious and manifest. It's just the nature of samsara. So rather than be shocked when we're suffering, it's almost like you're not shocked. You're expecting it because it is the way, it's the reality. You see how we're not divorcing ourselves from reality here. It's the reality of samsara, that things are difficult, challenging. I won't find lasting happiness and satisfaction. There's always something not quite right. So if we can expect that suffering is part of what we've signed up for, you don't remember signing up for it, right? But we have signed up for it with karma and afflictions. So we signed on the dotted line, and it's a contract that can't be ripped up unless we abandon karma and afflictions. That's the only exclusion clause that will nullify the contract. So that's what we have to do. So when we're experiencing suffering, we can think, this is my karma that's created this. I've created this, but we don't adopt a mindset that riddles ourselves with guilt. I'm such a bad person. In Buddhism and like in Tibetan and even Sanskrit, these are Dharma languages. So there's not even the word for guilt. Okay? That's refreshing in itself. So we come with this Western mindset of, we've been brought up with it to experience a sense of guilt. It doesn't serve us well in Dharma at all. And there's not even a word in those two Dharma languages. So yes, I've created the cause to experience this. So now, since I don't like it, okay, remember Shantideva's verse, how suffering has good qualities? Since I don't like it, I need to stop creating the cause for it. I need to develop that mind of renunciation that wants to be free of samsara and go towards liberation. Because I don't like it, other sentient beings won't like it as well. And I can feel the pain that they will be going through. And so I can use it to develop great compassion. Because I'm experiencing this suffering, it's clearly a result of non-virtue. I don't like it. I need to stop creating non-virtue. I need to purify using the four opponent powers, other non-virtues I've created so that they don't ripen. And because I seek the opposite, I better create virtue, delight in virtue, joy in virtue. Remember that Shantideva's Bodhisattva's Way of Life quote. It was in essence that, right? So we can think how we've created the cause and how we can purify it. And there is nothing that cannot be purified. See, guilt is very self-indulgent in some ways, and it's very paralyzing. And it keeps us just kind of like bogged like a vehicle in mud, bogged and just going around, the tires just spinning round and round. We're never getting out. It's kind of like we just dig ourselves deeper into our misery. So this guilt is useless and very self-indulgent in that sense. We're not useful to others when we're stuck in our guilt. And so there's nothing that cannot be purified. And so better to use our energy to purify whatever non-virtues we've created and having a sense of, regretting that I created that action which brings suffering to myself and to others and even into the future because karma increases. But developing a mind of resolve or restraint that will abstain from creating that action again in the future, and better to use the energy to cultivate virtue, some sort of remedy. This is a far superior method to be free of our suffering than to generate a mind of guilt that bogs us down deeper and deeper into our own misery. And that's why I say it's quite self-indulgent. So sometimes we have to break our habits because we've been so programmed through our conditioning to indulge in guilt. But if we can see the uselessness of it and the paralyzing nature of it and how it's no benefit to me or others, then we can slowly get less guilty at all, and that we don't even go into the guilt in the future. So guarding the causes, the wisdom of the small scope is having that worldly correct view or correct worldly view. I never remember the order of those words, but basically it's having conviction and karma and afflictions that if I engage in this action, it will bring this result. And so I don't want to engage in non-virtue, which brings suffering. And I do wish to engage in virtue, which brings happiness. And so if we can guard our actions, then we can guard creating more causes for suffering. And this can be another way we can use this mind of renunciation as a continuum to one day develop renunciation. It's not just going to happen, by itself without causes. But right now, we can, in our daily life, start to gain some traction that starts to move in the direction of one day being able to have that state of mind that gives up the pleasures of cyclic existence and the attachment to them, which is the biggest obstacle we have right now to developing renunciation. Because if we think that they're also fantastic, we won't seek a higher happiness, right? But we can slowly over time, give up seeking the pleasures of samsara to seek a higher lasting happiness of liberation and enlightenment. So these are like just some of the ideas that we could put together to use whatever arises in our day-to-day suffering and samsaric existence to try to go beyond it. Also, remember there's some good imagery about attachment. And apart from Rinpoche's one about, use toilet paper and you just want to throw it away, which is kind of a bit gross, but Rinpoche was quite funny in getting our attention like that. But also like from the teachings in the Buddha, it talks about, this attachment, which is what we want, isn't it? Which is wrong thinking. But we just want so much happiness and attachment and, all the good things of samsara. It's like we don't seek to go beyond samsara, hey? But this is what we want to train to do. And so to overcome that attachment, which we find so like bait, like we're baited, we're hooked by it. We want to overcome this attachment. And so the analogy is like licking honey off razor blades, honey-coated razor blades. Remember that analogy? Ouch. So that's what attachment is like. Or seeking shade under the hood of a cobra was another one. Like this attachment doesn't bring us that lasting happiness at all. In fact, it has a great cost. So if we can look at the cost of our attachment, perpetuating our samsara, then some of these analogies can be good. I don't know if you know Geshe Lama Konchok from A Mistaken Child and Tenzin Punsak Rinpoche, the reincarnation. But Geshe Lama Konchok used to say, it's all contaminated. So he was never fussed by all the pleasures of samsara at all. He just saw it as all contaminated, and so whatever mantras you can bring to mind to try to give up that mind of attachment and wanting, just when you go shopping, for instance. So we can use, even when we go shopping, the mind of renunciation. So instead of going window shopping and craving everything we see, and I want this, I want that, and lusting after anything and everything that we're looking at, we can see it as all contaminated and not actually going to bring lasting happiness at all. And so we can try to develop a mind of renunciation even in that context. Okay, the more we can develop this mind of renunciation that sees all these samsaric pleasures as contaminated, the more we'll be able to push them away and focus on a higher happiness. So renunciation when we go shopping could be a good thing, or if you're shopping online, then try to bring a different mindset, or put them in the basket if your attachment's got to do that, but don't buy them that day, that moment, go back to it a week later. And then actually I do this, and I have a window in my Safari open, and I think, oh yeah, I need that, I need this. And it's true, I do need these thermal singlets that I've been wearing for about 10 years that have got major holes in them. I do need new ones. But I think, oh, no one can see the holes. They're covered. And so anyway, recently I put some singlets in to have the idea to get rid of the old ones. And then after about a week or so, I go, yeah, I don't need that. I don't need that. But I do need this in actuality, but I don't need all these extras that I thought looked pretty at the time. So it's amazing just what a week changes. And we don't need the things that we're thinking that we desperately need that day. So the more we can counter attachment and remember that 10 non-virtue of covetousness, where we sort of, have an intensified craving, where we just want to make something our own. So if we can go shopping and counter the covetousness and the attachment, the clinging and the craving, grasping, then we can do that with a mind of renunciation. So if you wish, you can make that your homework to try to resist buying something online that you might otherwise be have just spent your money, and you can, with the money you save, you can put it to Dharma. All right, so they're just some random ideas about how we might be able to use renunciation on a daily basis. I'd like to have a look at the three principal aspects of the path. There's a couple of verses there, and I just want to show you. I've just got to take you off gallery view for a second, or widen it actually, and go into share screen. Okay, okay, we can have a look at this first. So what have I got here? So what stops us developing renunciation is quite often what we call the 8 worldly concerns. And so if we have this attachment to these 8 worldly concerns that are constantly seeking out praise from others, and all comfort and all the happiness and pleasures that we can get, and just getting stuff, if we can give up attachment to that, then we can start to move in the direction of renunciation. But right now we oscillate between attachment and aversion, this gain and happiness when we gain, and loss brings about unhappiness, despair. And then when someone says something great about us, they praise us, we're elated and puffed up by it, generating even a pride and so forth. We have attachment to their praise. And if someone criticizes us or blames us or says something that we don't like, talks badly about us behind our back, making others think bad of us, then we're deflated and we have aversion to all of this. And so we're constantly going between attachment and aversion. When people say nice things, attachment; bad things, aversion. And this oscillation happens continually throughout our day. So see if you can notice the attachment, the aversion, in getting what you think you want and need, and not getting what you think you want and need. So these 8 worldly concerns, it's not just that they stop renunciation, but when they're together with self-cherishing, they'll also stop us developing bodhicitta. And when they're together with a sense of grasping at inherent existence, they will also stop us developing the correct view of emptiness. So they have different levels of these 8 worldly concerns. Some are more like, in your face, and then some are more mixed, and then some are lighter looking. But nevertheless, there's different levels of the 8 worldly concerns. But this is something that we're quite programmed to want the good things and not want the bad things, the discomfort and the blame and bad reputation and stuff. So there's some good texts on this that Lama Zopa Rinpoche has written. I can give you titles of them later. There's a number of books, and they're really excellent. And I think one's even called 8 Worldly Concerns or something as well. But there's several of them. All right. So renunciation, just so you know what it is. So it's a mind, right? And it's wishing to definitely emerge from samsara. That was one element of it. Not just emerge from samsara, but even what causes it, true origins. So it's wanting to separate from true origins and true suffering. And the other direction, it's wanting to attain the state of liberation. It's wanting to go in this direction towards liberation or even enlightenment, if we have it as a shared practice with a bodhisattva vehicle, sharing that middle scope. So we're wanting to be separated, the mind wanting to definitely emerge from samsara, true origins of true suffering, and attain liberation, true paths, which will bring about that true cessation, that liberation that we seek. Okay, so remember, it's got these 2 elements. All right, so this renunciation applies not only to this life, but to all future lifetimes and to all of samsara. It's a huge way of thinking. As we saw in the small scope, there was elements of it, middle scope, pure renunciation, and even in the great scope. So we're renouncing not just lower realms, even upper realms. We're renouncing entirely samsara, true origins, true suffering, and seeking something alternatively to that. Since the mind is endless, we might as well put it in a good direction of going towards liberation. So it's a massive, massive mind, very, very broad mind. Okay, why do we need it? Without renunciation, there's no path, no way of getting out of samsara. So it's critical. Impossible to attain liberation or great compassion, bodhicitta, enlightenment. I've said that a few times just to bring that home. I've written that as a summary there. So let's go and look at the three principal aspects of the path, just the verses that are relevant. So we're looking at renunciation, right, as our true path here. Let's see. This is the purpose. So Lama Tsongkhapa has written this. I think there's also 14 verses in this one as well. Like in Foundation of All Good Qualities, about 14 verses. So he's written the purpose of generating renunciation, and then he'll show us how to develop renunciation. And then he'll even give us the measure by which we can judge whether we have achieved the state of mind of renunciation or not. So he says, without the complete intention, definitely to be free from circling in samsara, there is no way to pacify attachment, seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Also, by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. So there's a lot there, and just in essence, we'll look at some of these things. So without the complete intention, definitely to be free. So it's a very strong, determined mind that wants to be free of samsara. And what holds us back, what's the biggest obstacle, is the attachment to the pleasures of samsara, thinking they're everything. So we need to definitely turn away from that contaminated happiness, that second suffering of change. But remember, that wasn't enough, was it? You remember? We needed to focus on the third suffering, the pervasive suffering of conditionality. That was that ticking time bomb that any moment can give rise to the suffering of pain or the suffering of change. So although we need to turn away from contaminated happiness, the suffering of change, we actually need to turn away entirely from that third suffering, which keeps us circling in samsara under the control of karma and afflictions that will be programmed to experience suffering in every moment. Sometimes it'll be more manifest and other times more subtle. So it's a strong determination to be free from the bondage of samsara, and also craving for cyclic existence. Embodied beings are continuously bound. This craving, I briefly mentioned the 12 links as when I looked at true origins, and I said 1, 8, and 9, ignorance, craving, and grasping were the true origins that are afflictions. 2 and 10 were karma. And so that craving for cyclic existence, while we have that craving, which is grasping, is also intensified craving. It probably means grasping here though. But while we have that craving and grasping, we'll forever be bound. You remember the next link was to take existence, that a karma will ripen at the time of death, which will throw us again into another set of 12 links. So Lama Tsongkhapa is telling us here the importance of us cultivating renunciation, that we've got to be free of samsara, and we need to give up our not only contaminated happiness and attachment to it, but even that third suffering, that pervasive suffering. How do we do it though? Well, he's laid out the method, and you'll see this method goes back to even small scope stages. He's looking at the 3 scopes, remember? Freedoms and endowments. Well, that says precious human rebirth, doesn't it? Freedoms and endowments are difficult to find. And life has no time to spare, death and impermanence. This is a small scope, isn't it? By gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life is reversed. So if we can overcome just focusing on this one life alone and actually use our precious human rebirth in the most meaningful way, and that would be, for instance, to seek more than, the happiness of this life, but to seek liberation or enlightenment, and even to do that, seeking enlightenment in each moment by setting a good motivation, whatever we're doing. So using our precious human rebirth in the most skillful way, knowing that death could come even today, gaining familiarity with these meditations, then we will overcome attraction to the appearances of just this one life alone and seek the happiness of future lives in the small scope, isn't it? So he continues, because that's not enough. This is all small scope stuff there. By thinking over and over again that actions, there's a word for karma, and their effects are unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence. So here's where we get to explicitly to the middle scope. But notice that the karma actions and their results, although it's a small scope practice, it's also comes again and again in the middle scope, doesn't it? True origins, karma and afflictions. So by thinking over and over again about karma and how it's unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating again and again the suffering that we experience in cyclic existence, not just the lower realms, but all of samsara, then we're going to even overcome wanting to seek a good future rebirth, as a small scope practitioner does. So attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. We don't just want that attraction to a good fortunate rebirth. We want to be free entirely of samsara, the miseries of circling again and again endlessly. Okay? So this is the method of how we generate renunciation. And how do we know if we've got there? Well, he tells us the measure or the definition of having generated renunciation. Lama Tsongkhapa tells us that when, by having trained in that way, there is no arising, even for a second, of attraction to the perfections of cyclic existence, and all day and night, the intention seeking liberation arises. So it's always these two things. Turning our back on samsara, turning our mind towards liberation. When you can do that in each moment, then you have renunciation. So we're a bit of a way from that, and that's okay. We're not there yet. But as long as we're starting to move in the continuum of, that would be beneficial. Okay. So how does that sound so far for renunciation? Does some of it make sense? Yeah. It's food for thought, right? So it's a caused phenomenon, and it won't come about without causes. And so that's where we have to, right now, on a daily basis, try to bring in a sense of renunciation, okay? As much as possible. Remember, it's a state of mind, and it's trying to give up attachment, okay? It's not running off and becoming a great yogi and, putting on robes and these sorts of things, or getting rid of everything and living, with nothing. It's nothing like that. Nothing to do with the physicalities or anything external, but it's a state of mind. So slowly, if we can start to, or quickly, even if you can, but otherwise slowly, if we can start to give up attachment to the external things that we think are creating our happiness, then we can stop it being a roadblock to developing the path to liberation. Have you got some questions at this stage? Are you terribly bored? Maybe you're all bored. No, you're okay. Remember, yeah, okay, thank you, Isabella. Remember, I'll go to you next. Remember those doing the exam and stuff. The exam is, without a text in front of you, it's checking what you know and what you don't yet know. It's not seeing how quickly you can find something in a text, right? That would be crazy. So, I call it, with the people I do DB on a weekend, we have the whole weekend, and we do it once a month. And so every second month they do the exam, and we call it a personal reflection exercise, because some people have aversion to the word exam, right? But they're on board. 38 of them are doing the exam each module, and so they've gotten used to it by now. And so hopefully you guys also are going back and revising what we cover, and trying to read Lamrim texts and extend your knowledge and these sorts of things. Isabella, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Yeah, how can I
Um,
help?
so I I guess it's two parts. One being I think about sometimes within renunciation, a particular path, such as like a mastery of a skill or an expression that you become so devoted and disciplined to that
Right.
practice that all of the sense pleasures and instant gratification and desires seem to fall
Mm,
aside, and your sole focus is that particular path,
yeah.
whether it be yeah, like a musical vision or maybe something within like the visual arts or arts in general.
Okay.
Like I think about a Mozart or I don't know if you know Jacob Collier. He's a newer musician, but he that kind of that path where you devote everything to
Yeah.
one expression and
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
you kind of renounce like for example no relationships, no sex, um no like particular foods that you don't eat, and not and dedicating your entire life to practicing that
Mm-hmm.
skill. So you really don't do anything else besides practicing that. Would that also be a path of renunciation?
No, it wouldn't be a path of renunciation in the context of the three principal aspects of the path. Because what's happening there, Isabella, is they're still generating attachment for things of samsara, the pleasures of samsara, whether they be the music or whatever their passion is. And while they're not targeting karma and afflictions and overcoming those, they'll never be free of samsara. And so they're using all this amazing merit that they've got to really generate a passionate, single-pointed direction or focus in what their endeavor is, their pursuit. It's a very disciplined, determined mind. So there's some similarities there, but they're not doing two things. They're not turning their back on samsara, seeking liberation. They're not turning their back on true origins and true suffering to seek true cessations and true paths. So then nothing is overcoming the root of samsara, which is this ignorance grasping at inherent existence. There's no wisdom realizing the lack of inherent existence. So they will continue to circle in samsara and maybe not in a fortunate human rebirth next life, hopefully so, but maybe not even, because we're not free of taking rebirth as an animal and so forth until, the path of preparations, the clear delineation where you won't fall to the lower realms. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's some correlation with the determination and the single-pointed focus in a direction, but
Mhm.
it's not at the exclusion of karma and afflictions. And so in that sense, I don't see it being a renunciation in this context at all, but there is some wonderful determination in their mind to pursue uninterruptedly with great vision and focus. But I'd say the object of their pursuit is going in a samsaric way.
Mm.
How do you feel about that comment? Are you okay with how I've explained that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that definitely that clears it up. Um, and I think it's true. It has a transcendental nature to it where you can transcend these afflictions and aversions of the
Yeah,
self, but you're still within the samsaric circle where you
yeah.
still have desires and
This
attachments,
is it. Yeah. And
even to the very
remember,
thing that you're dedicating yourself to.
absolutely. And even remember, even, beings who have great concentrations, in the formless and form realms, they still had this pervasive suffering, this third type of suffering, at least, if not more. So once again, they're not ever beyond the
Mm.
third pervasive suffering. And so therefore they haven't renounced that. And so they will, remain in cyclic existence forever. So yeah, it's a bit more than what your example, your friends in your example are doing. It's a bit more than that that's needed. And but certainly there's some good similarities of what we could learn with that, single pointed direction of pursuing something so valuable, meaningful as how to overcome our suffering forever and achieve liberation. If we could develop that sort of mindset as our object, with their strong determination that they, give up all these distractions of sex and things that you mentioned, relationships and whatever else, so that they're not, disturbed in their state of mind, that they can remain more concentrated in what they're doing in their pursuit. But if our pursuit was on a goal of Dharma, then imagine how much progress we could make. But also remember, sometimes for us, or not for us, sorry, but sometimes for you guys as lay practitioners, sometimes the best work we can do is within our family. Okay? So remember, it's not so much giving up our family and all of these things, as we said in the early slide about the misconceptions of renunciation, running away to the solitary place, because where sentient beings are is where we want to be, to help them. But to help them, we really need to develop some of these minds. So we might need to do retreat and so forth and develop these minds, and then we can bring our activities to them. And if we haven't got time for retreat and so forth, then we can, when we look at the 6 perfections, next week, I think it is, we can look at how we bring those 6 perfections into the family unit, how we bring it into our relationships with our colleagues and so forth. Yeah, so to make it practical, right? In our daily life, how we can use these things. Yeah. Joe. Thank you, Isabella.
I kind of interpreted what Isabella was saying in a different way, but I think I missed a bit of it. But for me, being in this human body,
Yeah.
For me, we have most of us, or some of us have a choice of what form our lives take, how we shape it, what we pursue, in terms of a career or activities. So taking Isabella's example of people involved in the visual arts or music or cleaning houses.
Sure.
But for me, the form is secondary to the essence. So for me, the essence would be determination to pursue the path towards liberation for all sentient beings. So I said, because we have form and we live in a world that has form and shape,
Sure.
then it's almost like you don't need, it doesn't matter what your activities are, as long as the essence is pure and
the motivation and everything, right, Joe?
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying, because if you've got a very strong motivation that's dedicated towards benefiting sentient beings and cleaning up your own karma and afflictions and all of this sort of stuff and achieving liberation, enlightenment, so that you can work for their benefit, then you could be cleaning windows, vacuuming dust, you could be doing any of those things, or you could be doing any activity. But if you have it with a Dharma motivation, then it becomes supremely meaningful, whatever the form, whether it be cleaning houses or whatever. So that motivation, the action is the same. Your friends, Isabella, of these great, great beings doing, wonderful activities in the arts and so forth, if their motivation was different, that would also help a great deal, wouldn't it? It wouldn't help them with the correct view, because they still need to realize, the lack of inherent existence and so forth, and to stop having this inherently grasping at a self and my music and whatever I'm creating, my creations. There's still all this grasping. So they'll never be free of samsara while they have not developed the correct view. But at least changing the motivation so that it becomes one of renunciation or bodhicitta, then think of all the benefit they bring to others. Think of all the happiness they bring to others, right? Through their music and so forth. But it's still just perpetuating samsara for everybody. But if it was creating a connection to be able to bring lasting happiness of, liberation, enlightenment, and making a strong karmic connection with them now through the music, to be able to do that in the future. And, all of these sorts of things, if you just extend the motivation, then any instrument you're playing, any note goes on in that direction of that motivation, and then dedicating that merit for all sentient beings to experience those results. Just changing that motivation, like Joe's saying, doesn't matter what the form is. If they've got that strong, that essence I'm taking as motivation, Joe, the essence, if the motivation is really quite pure and going in direction of being free of samsara, achieving liberation, then that could be really beneficial. Okay. So I'm going to put something in the chat. Here's another bit of homework for you. This saves Isabella doing it with your good thinking earlier to write that before. May you think about that question over the next week. And also remember, one of your homework exercises ongoingly is to look at, I'm just getting the file for you of the 3 principal aspects, to look at happiness and how it increases over the stages. And also another one was the quote about the Buddha, do not engage in non-virtuous actions, perform only virtuous actions, subdue the mind thoroughly. This is a teaching of the Buddha. So how in this middle scope are we talking about subduing the mind thoroughly? We talked about the 3 principal aspects of the path, for instance. How does that relate? We talked about ethics and vows, non-harmfulness and not killing and all the other pratamoksha vows in the last couple of weeks. We've mentioned some of them at times. So I think how does the middle scope practice fit with that one verse of the Buddha's teachings to, not engage, do not perform non-virtuous actions, perform only virtuous actions, subdue the mind thoroughly. How does that play out in the middle scope? So keep those things alive ongoingly. Now, there's the 3 principal aspects of the path. In case you missed it earlier, I'll put the Foundation of All Good Qualities in there as well. So you have those files. And yeah, both of those prayers every day, without fail, I will recite. And I think it's wonderful if you can also similarly do that. You'll be creating the whole path to enlightenment in your mind through the single prayers. All right, if we can go to the dedications, and then we can look at wrapping up. I can't believe this is going down in history. I may finish on time. So okay, let's see. I haven't got there yet. I might have jumped the gun because I was so surprised. All right. Oops, go back. There we go. Come on. Okay. All right, so I'll just get this screen share up for you. So dedication, come on, cooperate with me. Okay, so now it's ready. So we can think of all the amazing merit that we've been able to gather. We're motivated with the 3 principal aspects of the path. Our mind has remained in virtue, thinking of how we can achieve the goal of liberation and enlightenment for the welfare of all living beings. And so all that merit we can pool together with all the merit of the past, present, and future, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas' merits, into this one giant ocean dedicated to enlightenment of every living being. This merit doesn't belong to us. It's merely labeled by the mind, and we offer it to all sentient beings. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. May the precious view of emptiness not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. And then for Tantra, may the precious realization of the 2 stages not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. So we want to develop these 3 principal aspects of the path in the 2 stages in our continuum. For the long life prayer of His Holiness, incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Swift return of Kabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay. All right, so thank you, everyone. And so, yeah, hopefully it's been beneficial for you. If it hasn't, trust me, there are seeds there. One day it will seem beneficial, if not now. All right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to help. And yeah, I wish you all a beautiful week. And I know I've given you a bit of homework as well as, you know, to study, whether you're doing an exam or not. And yeah, on the basis of study is what we take into our reflection, our meditation, analytical meditation, and then single-pointedly hold those conclusions. So study, reflection, meditation. Okay. All right.
you.
Well,
Thank
enjoy.
you, Pema.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Isabella.
Isabella.
Thank you, babe.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Pema.
Thank you.
Thanks, Isabella. See you next week.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you,
night.
guys.